The alarm bells are ringing in the financial world. At least they should be. Maybe they're ringing quietly. Maybe it's a silent alarm. That's what it is, because one does not have to be a financial guru or an economist or Warren Buffett to take a look at the 10-year treasuries and realize, wow, that's bad. You just have to look at the charts. The charts say everything. And I know, oh no, he's going to bring up charts. No, I'm going to let Nick Giambruno over at International Man do that. And just to be clear, International Man is not exactly a pro-America outlet, but they do have certain conspiratorial perspectives when it comes to the economy that I would say are just a little bit to the fringe side of, say, like a zero hedge, for those of you who aren't familiar with the publication. Sometimes they get it spot on right. Other times they're wrong badly. But in this case, unfortunately, even I can tell that they're probably right on this. The 5% line in the sand, the Treasury yield that could break the fiat system. Now, that's a little bit hyperbolic, but it does. Again, alarm bells should be ringing. I'm not sure why they're not. The 10-year Treasury yield is perhaps the most important financial benchmark in the global fiat systems, as it drives valuations and market trends worldwide. It is widely and erroneously regarded as the risk-free rate of return. The 10-year Treasury yield can be thought of as a key barometer of the U.S. dollar-based fiat system, a critical measure akin to its beating heart. The dollar is what keeps the world afloat. Well, God keeps the world afloat, but the Holy Spirit keeps the world afloat, but the dollar is one of the tools through which the economic system of the world is maintained. Otherwise, there would be chaos. And some would argue that otherwise there definitely will be chaos at some point, whether it's this year, next decade, next century, who knows? Somebody knows. Somebody knows. Bond yields move inversely to bond prices. When bond prices fall, bond yields rise. Common sense. A rising 10-year Treasury yield signals trouble for the U.S. dollar because it means investors are selling treasuries, which pushes up the U.S. government's borrowing costs. That is why the 10-year Treasury yield is a major pain point for the U.S. government. The 10-year Treasury yield was 3.97% in late February of this year. Now it is around 4.65%, an increase of roughly 68 basis points. 68 BPS might not seem like much, but with $39 or $39, I wish, $39.3 trillion in debt and growing, every basis point matters. When you're talking about a tenth of a percent against trillions of dollars, that's a crap ton of money, folks. At today's debt level, every 1 basis point increases the government's average borrowing cost adds roughly $3.9 billion in annual interest expense. So a 68 BPS rise is not trivial. It translates to nearly $265 billion in additional yearly interest costs, materially widening a budget deficit that is already around $1.8 trillion. So more than 10% of the, well, more than 15%, I should say, of the current monthly budget deficit. This is not good. Just a little bit of a rise when you're dealing with numbers of that magnitude can have an impact on how we spend, how we tax as a nation, what we do, especially when you have the judiciary and the Democrats against bringing tariffs back fully, which they should be. I watched a documentary yesterday regarding the history of the dollar and taxation, and going back just 115 years ago when, it was tariffs that drove our economy. It was tariffs that drove our spending. And when you have something that's based upon production from outside of the nation and consumption in the nation, instead of production within the nation itself, that's where you have good things. Would we have to spend less? You betcha. But by golly, income tax, property tax, this tax, that tax. Clearly, I'm not a fan. Back to the article. I expect the 10-year Treasury yield to keep climbing over the coming weeks and months until it forces the Fed's hand. At this point, the intervention will be sold as, quote-unquote, stability, but the mechanism will be familiar: suppress yields by debasing the currency. It's been a rinse and repeat. Doesn't matter about the party. Doesn't matter about the Fed chair. Doesn't matter about whoever's in office. When this happens, and it's going to happen, it will be because otherwise there will be a crash, and that's how they'll sell it to us. Now, I'm not bold enough to say, you know what, let it happen, but sometimes there's a part of me that says, you know what, let's let it happen. Let's let it crash, and let's rebound bigger, better, bolder. Oh, I'm starting to sound like Biden. Hopefully, God forbid. Nobody knows exactly how high the 10-year yield will rise before the Fed is forced to act. If I had to guess, I would say around 5%. A level not seen since, wait for it, the 2008 financial crash. In more recent years, every time the 10-year yield has approached 5%, something has happened to push it back down. That's why I think 5% is the line. Now, here's the chart. If you can see it on the screen, here's the chart of 10-year Treasury yields. You will see that in 01, again in 07, 08, well, we'll call it 06 through 08, and then more recently during the about midway point of the Biden years all the way through until today, we're seeing it staying or hovering around that same basic level. That's, again, not good. Higher yields mean the U.S. government must pay tens or even hundreds of billions more in interest on its debt. At the same time, the global economy faces even greater added costs because Treasury rates serve as the benchmark for borrowing worldwide. The problem is that interest on the federal debt is already over $1.2 trillion and is now the second largest item in the budget. The U.S. government cannot afford yields going much higher because the interest expense would push it toward explicit bankruptcy. Unavoidable. I mean, some are already saying that we are beyond the point of no return. There's no way that we can dig out of this hole, which will, of course, push towards modern monetary theory. It'll favor the democratic socialists of America. They'll be saying, "You'll see, capitalism is broken. The only way to fix it is to eliminate it." And the jails at the same time. Back to the article. The math simply does not work, not even with slightly higher interest rates. Something has to give, and we will not have to wait long to find out what. I think there is an excellent chance the Fed will be forced to engage in yield curve control, either implicitly or explicitly, and cap long-term yields. If I'm right, rising Treasury yields are only the beginning. Record debt, money printing, and growing political and social instability could create extraordinary volatility and serious consequences for your wealth and personal freedom. Yes. Good stuff there over at International Man. And again, a lot of their stuff I totally, completely, and 100% disagree with. In this case, this is one of those where, yeah, the alarm bell, they should be ringing. The fiat currency system is and has always been broken. And to be clear, it was designed to break. I mean, that's something that I don't know, maybe you all, my audience knows this. But I think there are a lot of people out there, the vast majority, I would argue, that have no idea that the fiat currency system is designed specifically to break. It's not possible for it to sustain indefinitely. It was designed for a generation or two to get super rich, super wealthy, super powerful, and then for things to start crumbling. And that's exactly what has been happening for 100 years. Can it be fixed? I have to hope that it can. You know, I am a Bible-believing Christian. Therefore, I do know that regardless of what the charts say, regardless of what this journalist or that guru or this podcaster says, that God will determine what actually happens. When you're talking about the macro, when you're talking about things that are happening in the world that impact the world itself, these are things that are in God's hands. If he allows it to happen, then it will happen, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. If he prevents it from happening, if he has our destruction coming in some other form or fashion, a la the book of Revelation, then there's nothing that we could do to push it forward. It will get fixed, or at least changed in some way that prevents this crash. But here's the thing. If and when this crash happens soon, it does behoove all of us to be prepared. And I'm not going to say, oh, go buy crypto, go buy gold and silver, go buy whatever. No, I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to give you any financial advice. I will just say this. The two things that will hold you captive the most in this upcoming brave new world of financial collapse will be debt and debt. Ah, gotcha. You were waiting for that second one, but no, really. It is time to do whatever you can to eliminate your debt, become a cash person, become liquid as much as possible. Make sacrifices if necessary to eliminate your debt to anyone, whether it's tax burdens, eliminate those. If it's credit card debt, mortgages, car payments, do what you can to make it to where you are not owing to anyone. And I know that's easier said than done, especially for those of us who are in major debt, and I'm one of them. But now's the time to strive, push forward, do as much as you can to eliminate debt altogether. Because only then do at that point, then they have to come with guns to take your property. And I'm not saying they won't, but at least they won't be able to just sign some paperwork and say, oh, nope, this belongs to the new government. The Democratic Socialists of America declare your debt to be our debt, and blah, 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 blah. That unfortunately, sadly, might happen. So how do you avoid it? Go liquid as much as possible.
Pay that man his money.